Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Human in Me. You are here with your boy Mpomaswatle, and I am joined by Ndamulelo.
Welcome back.
Okay. Well, I hope your week was great.
No, it was cool.
It was
a chilled
cool.
week.
Okay. It was a chilled week.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. At least this week we didn't have a lot of assignments to have to deal with.
Yeah.
You didn't.
Nah, I had an extension.
Okay.
They extended it for the whole class. So.
Okay. Oh yeah, I remember. I remember someone sent me that saying that they didn't send it to me. They just put it on their status.
Oh.
So now it makes sense why. Okay, so this is episode 11 of the Human in Me podcast, and we wanted to touch on something that we feel like is very important. Everything that we discuss obviously is important. So,
Yes, sir.
and before I even go anywhere, I just want to highlight something that part of the reason why we're doing this thing, the podcast, is so that we can equip you with the knowledge that will help you understand yourself as a human being, so that if you can understand yourself, it will make it easy for you to understand other people. It's not an easy process, obviously. It has its twists and turns, but at least it puts you at an advantage.
Yeah. And another good indication of whether self-development is for you is if you're genuinely interested in yourself and studying the knowledge that comes with self-discovery. Because if you don't gravitate towards that, then maybe you're destined to be enlightened in your next lifetime.
Listen to yourself. Next life. Wow. Okay. So today we'll be discussing culture. And because like I just said, we feel like everything that we discuss here is very important. And part of the reason why we wanted to touch on culture is because we wanted to get you to realize just how your cultural background influences the person that you become, and how you view the world, and how you look at the world, and how you relate to other people, right? Because we feel like it's very, very important. And then, well, in front of me I have the definition of culture, because I wanted us to touch on the definition, so that as we move forward, we are talking from the same reference, right? So it's from the Merriam-Webster. So it goes like, culture is basically the beliefs, the customs of a particular society, group, place, or time. A particular society that has its own beliefs, ways of life, art, etc. A way of thinking, behaving, or working that exists in a place or an organization, right? I'm sure you guys, I don't know if you guys have heard about what do they call it? The company culture.
Oh yeah.
Like every company has its own culture, and they have their way of doing things. They have their way of thinking. They have their ways of relating to each other, right? But the one that we're mostly interested in is culture on a basic day-to-day human level. Because you don't sleep at your workplace. You don't eat at your workplace. You have to go home at the end of the day, So so the thing is that I was reading an article this morning, right, that focused on the influence of culture on behavior, cognition, and emotions, right? And part of the reason why I read the article is because of the fact that, like I just said, the fact that it's very, very important for you to understand your background and how you came to be who you are, right? If you can understand that, it's going to make it easy when you see someone behaving in a way that you don't understand. You will also be able to understand where they are coming from. You don't have to understand, the content of whatever they will be talking about or looking at, but it kind of gives you an idea as to, as to where this person might be coming from. And that also, influences how you interact with that individual, because I've seen people getting into unnecessary arguments because of a lack of understanding of each other's cultures and stuff, So it's very, very important for us to be able to touch on that. So in this article, they used two examples, right? People from America and people from Asian countries. So the authors outlined the fact that America is more individualistic, and then Asian countries are more collective, right? This is something we once talked about, but we didn't go deep into it.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's fundamental to the human in me because it goes back to the. It's fundamental to the human in me because it goes back to the very first podcast.
Yeah, it goes back to the first podcast. That's what I'm saying. I remember that we did this thing. So in the American culture, it's all this thing that, you know, every man for himself. You need to learn to stand for yourself. You know, your life, even the sense of self, like how you look at yourself. You look at yourself from an individualistic, you know, point of view. But when you interact with people from Asian countries, they look at themselves in relation. They look at themselves in terms of how they relate to others, right? So a typical example would be, I'm a kind person, you know, I'm an understanding person, because the only way you can know whether you are understanding or a kind person is in relation to somebody else, right? But when it comes to things like the one thing that I have in mind is creativity, right? With creativity, you can create stuff, right? You don't necessarily need someone to sit there. Like you can create stuff in relation to your own self, not in relation to other people, right? So people it's not only Asian countries, but even in Africa, we have the same thing. You know, we tend to identify ourselves in terms of how we relate to others, right? Obviously, there are advantages and disadvantages to both of them. But the most important thing, the thing that we wanted you to see, is how those things affect how we look at the world. Because like I just said, people in Asian countries identify themselves in terms of how they relate to other people. That's another way in which they look at the world. And then you look at American people, you know, they do it individualistically. So everything they do is all about, it's centered around the self, right? And then another thing that they mentioned was the fact that
I think the culture is more Western, and that's basically
which culture is more Western?
American culture. I mean, that's what Western culture
yeah.
means. It means the culture of the people from the West.
And then another thing that the authors mentioned was the fact that when you look at the information that's available on how to go about the self, like, you know, self-identity, right? Most of the information that you're gonna find is basically based around the Western concept of the self, right? The majority of the information is based, and then they touched on this whole thing about self-actualization, and then they outlined the fact that with self-actualization, what we fail to realize is that despite the fact that, okay, so what we fail to realize with regards to the self is that everything that we know and everything that we've learned, right, we learn from other people, even the way in which we behave, we're told. So that, like, your way of looking at the world, your way of looking at life is something that you learned from other people, and other people learned it from other people. So basically, at the end of the day, obviously there are different views, right? But the one that appealed the most to me was the one which is basically the thing that I've been saying for a very long time, that I feel like there's no such thing as the self, like the individual self, right? There's no core to what a human can be. The only thing that's there is that you are a collection of different views and perspectives and ways of behaving and all that stuff, right? Which is the thing that makes it easy for you to interact with more than one person. Because if like, I just feel like there's just no way you can pinpoint that one particular thing, you know, that says this is who I am as an individual. Because even if you're able to pinpoint that, right, there's no way you could have had that within you if you didn't learn it from somebody else. We're talking. Even when you look at the taste of food, the taste of food depends on where you come from. Right? There are people who eat cockroaches, and they find them as being a delicacy. For them, cockroaches are a delicacy. They taste good for them, right? But when you look at them, and when you look at yourself and you think, this is just something that I have to kill so that to get it out of my kitchen. You know, it's not something that I would just sit down and start devouring. But, you know, some people do find those things a delicacy, and then for people in the West End, it's a different thing. And as I'm sure you've realized that South Africa has also become more and more and more Western because of the influence of television, obviously. So yeah, man, that whole thing was just, I don't know. It's very, very, very important for one to just sit down and start looking at how people around them do things, because that's like the easiest way to understand the kind of culture that exists in your community. If you can understand that, then it gives you a little bit of room to maneuver around and try to understand yourself.
Yeah, in
I
terms
can
of
tell you have something to say, so let's get down to business.
in terms of your opinion on the self and there being no such thing as a self, I think that's what all spiritual teachers push for. The because the perception of the self is what is called the ego, because you can only perceive a self in relation to something that is not the self, right? And that's where the ego comes from, right? So when you realize that everything is one, right, that's basically what they call the first enlightenment, which is everything is connected and we're all oneness, right? That's basically what they mean, right? Which is good, because it's the death of the ego, and it's basically what is referred to as what is basically common with the collective form of culture, like the Western, the Eastern culture, right? Because it's more grounded in Eastern philosophy, where there's no ego, right? And then the Western is more egotistical, right? Which is why it's individual. So you perceive the self, and you see yourself, and then that's where it starts from in relation to other people. Right. So there's something that you said which was like you said something along the lines of the only the there's no self because what the self expresses is something that has been taught, it has learned from other people, so it can't truly be the self. Right. And
Well, I didn't say it can truly be the self, but the self in itself is composed of different, perspectives and views and ways of looking at the world and behaviors and all that stuff.
Exactly.
So there's no, for me, like there's no
There's no
one
individual
particular,
self.
thing that we can pinpoint and be like, this is the self, this is who I am. Yeah, that's just my way of looking at it.
Yeah, so basically, that's true. Yeah, that's true, and I guess this is an addition to what you're saying, because it doesn't disqualify anything. It's basically the self is what I would view as what you would. It's basically that pullback. You remember the podcast? You remember the podcast we had with uh, about bliss and at peace, right?
Oh, the one we had with Diegete.
Basically, yeah, the
Okay.
self is basically that person that can pull back and see the influences, right? It's kind of like, for example, it's kind of like your subconscious mind, right? The subconscious mind does nothing on its own. All it is a template, right?
Yeah.
But basically, that's what the self is, a template, right? But then the self is also capable of being conscious, right? Unlike the subconscious mind, which is just, steady and initiates automatically, right? But basically, the self is that ability to be conscious and see all the influences that influence everything that gives rise to who you are and your identity, right? Just so I just wanted to put that in there so that you don't get confused thinking that you know you're just a composite average of everything, but then there's no you in between that, because that can be kind of scary if you think about it, because you might think, oh, I'm not in control of my life, and
Okay. Yeah.
oh yeah, so that's for the more anxious type of people. And yeah,
I wanted to add something,
uh-huh.
but continue.
All right, and with in the beginning of the podcast, right? I've been reading the Rational Male recently, and what's funny is this morning I just listened to it for like the book. I listened to the book, right? For 30 minutes before I left the house, and I was reading from pages 40 to 60 something, and it's where it goes deep on hypergamy, right? And that was a truth, you know. It's that was like hardcore red pill. That was like to the core. So it 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 it, it kind of like when you hear like something new that you hadn't realized, and it's like it you need that psychological space. It's like it traumatizes you and you need to breathe because
It kind of
reality has
goes
just
against what you've
exactly
come to know. Yeah.
your reality has just crumbled. And so that's literally what's been happening this morning, right? And it's similar to what we're doing right now, because we're basically l- we're basically telling you the matrix, right? The matrix, that's what culture is, right? That's what we're saying culture is. It's the matrix. Culture is the definition of culture, right? Is this exactly the same as the matrix, right? Now,
What
but
is the matrix?
it's basically culture. It's a set of views, beliefs,
Okay.
prioritizations that have been, you know, intrinsically, synced or intrinsically absorbed by you as a
Mm.
human being, as a
Mm-hmm.
person living, that basically determine who you are, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So now, when you take control of your own destiny, you have to start being aware of these things, right? And it's usually the awareness process starts with a problem, and then you realize that these beliefs are not working, right?
Oh yeah.
Because most people wouldn't have a problem in any area of their life if there were no discrepancies in culture and in basically what we're taught, right?
Mm.
And the biggest thing about it, the biggest thing why culture is it has discrepancies in terms of the belief it passes, is because as time progresses, things change, laws change,
That's true.
and basically those cultural beliefs, right?
They are challenged.
Exactly, they're no longer as useful as they should be, right?
Mm.
And the rationale for them, gives room for manipulation, right? I
Mm.
mean, their value, right? If you don't understand why it's done, right,
Mm, mm,
and you
mm.
consciously pick that out and become an adult and say, I'm trying to keep this value, um, I'm trying to keep this value, um, okay, I know why these beliefs were held by
Mm.
culture, right?
Yeah.
And then you go, how do I apply these in today's context, which is like you being conscious, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do that, then that's when it becomes a problem. That's when you know your life, you can't figure out your life. So
That's true.
basically what we're doing is literally teaching you how to re-engineer your life.
They kind of give you a foundation to work from. That's why you'll hear a lot of people saying that in order to know where you're going, you have to know where you're coming from.
Exactly.
Because where you're coming from is basically a blueprint. It's a template
Hmm.
against which to compare, you know, what's going on in the outside world, so that you can make sense of what's going on out there. Like you understand things in relation to yourself. And that's like the easiest way to go about understanding things. So that's basically what culture is giving you, that okay, here's a template to from which
Be
to
a
work.
functional adult, basically.
Exactly. And
That's the role of culture. It's kind of like school. We know that this person is a functional adult because he
the
has learned
yeah,
everything we
yeah.
need in order for him to be termed as a functional human being
Mm.
and normal, right?
Yeah, and like when you talk about being a functional human being, it kind of takes me back to the part that they mentioned in the article, which is that we oh yeah, so in Asian countries, right?
Uh-huh.
When I say Asian countries, just know that I'm also referring to other countries they mentioned, which are collective, Asian, African, and one thing that they mentioned was that your ability to be able to
That's
understand.
that's a pretty broad generalization. Asian African.
Anchor Asia is a continent.
Okay,
So most
that's
of
true.
Asian countries, because they did their studies, that's why I'm basically saying Asian countries. It's not all of them, but the majority of them are collective
Yeah.
as compared to America. All right. So the thing that they mentioned there was the
Uh-huh.
fact that maturity when it comes to Asian countries is basically um, your ability to relate to other people. All
Uh-huh.
right. How do you, if you can be able to understand what might be going on in somebody else's, I don't know, mind or some shit like that, then you basically become mature. So it's basically this whole thing of understanding the person sitting next to you,
Yeah.
that makes everybody look at you as being mature. But I'm pretty much sure in individualistic countries it's a different matter. Your ability to dive deep into yourself and focus on yourself, your goals and whatever. It's the thing that they more or less look at. But when you look at those Asian countries, it's a different matter. And then okay, so another thing is that it's I don't know what to say, but okay, so like I said before, South Africa has become more is moving towards being an individualistic country, because it's only now that you see that people are starting to get concerned about themselves. It's no longer about us. It's all about me. What do I get out of this? So the thing that happened, okay, let me even give you an example about South Africa becoming individualistic. When I was still growing up, right, my mother used to tell me that when I go to school, I should know that I'm going there for me and me alone. So I shouldn't even try to help other people, because we used to have that belief that someone can take your writing and bewitch your writing, and then you lose your your intelligence in a way. So it was drilled into me that you need to learn to work all by yourself, right? And I'm pretty much sure a lot of us are told that you need to be your own individual self, which is a good thing because it makes you less dependent on other people, right? But at this very same time, it has its own disadvantages, because being dependent on yourself entirely means that there are certain instances where you are going to overwork yourself unnecessarily, when you can always outsource the work and give it to somebody else, a friend or whoever, right? So because if you look at like in other collective countries, the people there know that if I help this person achieve their goals, intrinsically they are going to come back and help me achieve mine. So
That's
us
true.
working together, you are basically you are more in contact with each other's goals, that it makes it easy for you to be able to ask yourself, how can I help this person? Because during the whole time when you'll be doing your thing, them doing their thing and everybody doing their thing, it's gonna it's basically the more you get exposed to what each and every single one of you is doing, and the more you get exposed to that, the more you get to understand, oh, so this is what you do, right? The more you get to understand, oh, this is what you do, it's the more you get to understand how you can help in relation to what this person is doing. The reason why I was able to see this thing is because of the conversation that I had with my father in December, right? So he outlined, or okay, he made me realize that one of the few reasons why a lot of white people businesses are succeeding is because of the fact that they help each other, right? So if I'm a mechanic and these people are making noise, so if I'm a mechanic, right, if I'm a mechanic, right, I am going to outsource the whole business of getting new tires. I'll give that to somebody else who happens to be a friend of mine, right, to sell tires to my company. And then for things like fixing the engine, I will get a friend of mine to be the one who focuses only on fixing car engines. When I'm told, it's basically even the same thing with insurance companies. If you dig deep into insurance companies, you'll come to realize that
It's
one
basically
insurance company
creating mastermind alliances.
exactly creating mastermind alliances. But if you look at how we tend to do things as black people, not that I'm trying to compare, but it kind of, I'm just trying to bring forth the advantages of acting as a collective instead of
That's true.
acting as an
That's true.
individual.
Not to
Trying
mention
to
a big factor into that has to do with black people is that mastermind alliances, you have to do them with like-minded people, because this is a system that's going to keep you together. So basically, it's like most of the time it's not that black people don't want to help black people. It's just that it's kind of like a hood situation or a settlement situation.
explain that.
It's like if if you're the crab who got out of the bucket, and then you get an abundance mindset, right? And you probably can't get out of the bucket. You need you. It's usually through some act of luck that you live in a different area, and then you adopt a different mindset, right? Basically, you have to create alliances with like-minded people, right?
Yeah.
And you can't go back to those people who you left from, who still have that level of mindset, and try to elevate them, right?
Yeah.
Because they'll only bring you down. That's basically you trying to kill yourself
Exactly.
if you try to do that. So
You're just gonna
basically,
come across a brick wall.
exactly. So I think that's the rationale behind it, right? But I think what they miss is that they keep trying to reach up to get to somewhere instead of start where they are and build and develop from where they are.
Yeah.
So, like, if there's that reaching part, because everybody could keep reaching. I mean, this is like a common thing that happens with doctors and parents. They keep competing with other parents, and this other parent's got 2 cars. I need to get 2 cars.
Exactly.
And basically, that's like, that's that affects the quality of life for the whole family and the children.
And the progress of the community itself.
Exactly. So yeah, it's a few more factors, involved in that aspect, and just like the person who just got out of, a scarcity situation, they can't go back and try to teach that mentality. They just have to, represent and shine the light, and only help if
Someone
those
comes forth.
people from the scarcity, come toward them, because
that's true.
exactly, you can't reach out to those that don't want it.
Yeah, so the thing that we wanted, because we're coming to the end of the episode.
Yeah.
The thing that we wanted you to get here is look at your culture, like your beliefs, your customs, and your ways of looking at the world. Because obviously it's more or less the same as the people around you, right? And then try to look at how that has influenced your desires, the things that you gravitate towards, the things that that you kind of don't gravitate towards, and try to see how all those things are in play in building your identity as an individual, right? Because even when it comes to, like, for example, when it comes to patience, right? There's no such a thing as that you are born to do a certain thing, right? No one is born to be an engineer. No one is born to be a doctor. There's no such a thing. But the thing that you have to realize is that your ambitions or your goals will be determined by the culture that you come from, right? So I don't know how to simplify this thing, because I feel like I'm making it difficult. I don't know how to simplify this thing, but okay.
I think there's a lot of factors going into that. So
Yeah, they are.
I think you should go with one and stop trying to generalize it across everything. Because you're trying to spread it out too thin.
Fuck. Okay.
Just get them to realize that one thing, and
okay, patience. Your patience will be influenced by where you come from, right?
Exactly.
So you are not born to do any specific thing. That's one thing that you have to realize, right? You can branch out as much as you like, but the thing that you have to realize is that just find one thing.
Exactly. Your culture nurtures your passions.
Yeah, it nurtures your passions. It nurtures the things that you're interested in, And that's why I always say, like, the easiest way to look at where you come from as an individual is to look at the people around you. Look at the similarities between all of you. That's basically how you will be able to extract, the things that your culture has taught you. That's like the easiest way to extract those things, and when you understand them, you'll get to realize how they influence how you interact with the world. Because let me bring this example before we leave. This whole thing was of celebrating birthdays, right? We know that there are people who have grown up to be 70, 80, 90, 100 who have never celebrated their birthdays, right? So the moment someone comes into the picture and try to get you to celebrate your birthday, it's an uncomfortable experience. from the beginning. Like it's a completely uncomfortable, experience. I remember. You still remember when you bought a cake on my birthday, right? Oh, obviously
I
at that
could tell. I could tell.
exactly. For like it was just what the fuck is going on. But obviously I had to bring myself to to appreciate the thing that you were doing for me. But the whole thing in itself was like a completely new thing, and it was completely uncomfortable, right? But because of that experience, right, now I come to understand that if we try to do something for someone, right, and they don't understand why we're doing that, right, we have to come to a point where we don't feel like we are trying to do this thing for you, but you don't seem to appreciate what we do for you. Sure. Young told, because it does happen. So the thing that you need to realize is that people who are not familiar with certain things, they won't know how to receive them. It kind of goes back to episode number 9 when I was talking about the whole thing about you giving love to someone in a way that you understand that they are not familiar with. You're just gonna be trying to give them the love, but they won't see that, they won't That's realize true. That. So you'll be working against a brick wall, trying to push a brick wall. It's not like those people are bad in themselves, it's just that they're not familiar with that particular thing, because of where they come from. So the most important thing here is to just try to look at how your culture, like you can even look at yourself as a Tswana person, Sotho person, Venda, Tsonga, Zulu, and try to look at how Zulu people in your area or Zulu people in general do things, or Sotho people do things. That's basically where you'll get the essence of your culture, and try to see how that has influenced, how that influences how you interact with people, how that influence your interests in life, yeah, right? How that influence, like you just look at how your culture in itself influence the things that that are just around you, and it will give you an idea of it will get you to understand how those things are driving you, and it will also help you understand how those very same things are driving the person sitting next to you. So yeah, I think this is it, and we have to close the chapter.
Oh my, I had something to say. What did I have to say?
We still have 2 other episodes that are going to be based on the same, but more or less that you remember you said that we're going to have other episodes.
Yes, I remember.
So we can always include that in the next episode.
No, it's about this podcast. Okay. It would be beneficial for the next, but
because I'm kind of looking at the time.
We can expand on it
because right? I know it's gonna be long.
No, it's not.
Okay.
But basically, what you said about people analyzing where they come from and how their beliefs influence them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know we all want the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And, if you're not really passionate about self-development, like I mentioned earlier, might be in the next lifetime waiting for you, right? It's difficult to take the time to do such a detailed analysis to yourself, because like there's this one guy, Dan Penner, right, who says that if you can't spend a weekend alone, right, that's insanity, right? And most people can't do that. They have to be preoccupied with something else, right? So basically the easiest way, because analyzing and making a detailed analysis of yourself is difficult if you haven't been doing this for quite some time, right? So the easiest way is to see different aspects of your life, right? So basically look at all the aspects of your life, from relationships to business to career, right? And basically see where there are problems, right? And then that will be like, what are the beliefs that I have here? Because that's the most, because like that's more geared to the brain, because the brain finds out the negative,
and it tries to solve that,
and that will improve your life more dramatically.
That's a good way of looking at it,
because like if you have to go through every aspect of life, that takes a level of passion and dedication, right?
You don't have to solve everything though, because it's impossible for you to do
even the point of making yourself aware of the beliefs and how your culture influences you in certain aspects of life, right? it's easier if you have a problem in that aspect, right?
Yeah.
Then you can go, oh, okay, these are the beliefs that are not
Exactly.
working for me.
Yeah.
And the easiest bit is to, go for those people you admire and see how their beliefs don't correlate with yours,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the simplest way to do it. If you haven't been doing this for quite some time, because it takes a significant level of investment and dedication to self-improvement to um, go to an area where things are working, and then you deal with the more refined aspects,
Mm.
because that's like, okay, I get 70%, now I'm trying to get 90 to 100%. So that takes a lot more effort, right, than just I clearly see that I get 40 somethings in this area. In terms of percentage, not great, but and then I'm like, okay, let me just try to get 50 or 60, right? Because that's when you have to make the most tragic improvements, and then it'll encourage you more. Because if you're just starting out, because if you don't see the big results, right, when you're starting out, then you're more likely to give up.